Welcome to the weekend fantasy football Q&A for this week. A couple of things to note. Number one, if you have some last-minute fantasy football lineup questions that may arise on Sunday morning, you can feel free to tweet them to me at pfspot_schlegel on Twitter. I'll put that information in the description box. So that way, if you're desperate for help or you need advice on this or that, I'll do my best to help you out the best way I possibly can. I think I've helped out quite a number of people this year. A few people might feel differently, but that's the way it goes. Can't be perfect every time. Also, if you have other sports-related questions, you can also tweet them to me at pfspot_schlegel on Twitter for the Tuesday and Thursday Q&A editions where I answer questions both about sports and fantasy football. So without any further ado, let's get started with this weekend's fantasy football kind of sit-start Q&A. Fresh Carbon asks, who do I start at my flex, Ben Tate or Steve Smith Sr.? As a general rule, if one isn't clearly above the other, I say always go with the running back because the running back has multiple potential avenues to be able to score you points, both as a runner and as a receiver, whereas a receiver is pretty much limited to just what they do as a receiver. Now, Steve Smith has had a very nice season for the Baltimore Ravens, and Joe Flacco loves to target him. And you're almost guaranteed to get a solid performance out of Steve Smith most weeks. But at some point in time, I do wonder a little bit that him being 35 years of age, is he going to slow down a little bit as the season goes along? I also look at Ben Tate's matchup against the Jaguars, and I say, this is the Jaguars, and Tate looked really good last week. I do have concerns about how much different that offensive line is going to look without their star center, Alex Mack. I also have concerns about Isaiah Crowell, a guy that I was a very big fan of out of this last draft class, sitting there and taking some of his carries and perhaps his goal line and scoring opportunities. But I think you still got to roll with Ben Tate. Pittsburgh fan 0. I have Phillip Rivers and Aaron Rodgers. I'd like to trade Rivers, and I'm weak at running back. So who do you think I could get for Rivers? You're not going to get much. And this is why, and this question will probably come up more, and you won't be the first, and you haven't been the first, you most certainly won't be the last. Individuals that draft multiple quarterbacks, even though I tell you not to draft multiple quarterbacks, this is one of the major reasons why. Let's say you probably drafted Aaron Rodgers, somewhere in the second or third round, or hell, who knows, maybe even the first round, but I'll say second or third round. Then probably somewhere in the middle of the draft, you drafted Phillip Rivers. You thought it would be great to have two quarterbacks. Every week you've probably guaranteed to have a stud performance. But now you've gotten to the point where you realize that that's not entirely necessary, and you see a weakness at one of your other positions that could have potentially been addressed in the draft at that draft slot where you took Phillip Rivers instead. You are not going to get the value for a big producing quarterback like you would for a running back or a wide receiver. So what are you going to get for Phillip Rivers? Probably a running back 2 or a running back 3. You're not going to get a stud running back. Nobody's going to sit there unless they're completely idiotic and trade a top 5 or top 10 fantasy football running back for a top 5 or top 10 fantasy football quarterback. It's just not going to happen because it's easier to pick up starting quarterbacks on the waiver wire than it is starting running backs. And that's a big problem with this whole philosophy of taking multiple quarterbacks, and then you get to a point in time where you realize, oh God, I only really need one. The other guy's going to sit there and wait, or it's going to cause me to play too much of the matchups every week, and I'm going to end up leaving a lot of points on the bench throughout the season. So you might get to a point where if you're really desperate at running back, you're either going to have to cut another player at another position, or you might have to explore the possibility of cutting Phillip Rivers. I would go and I would sit there and propose as many deals as you possibly could for a running back, maybe somebody like a Ben Tate, like I brought up. But keep in mind that you're not going to get nearly what you think you deserve to get unless you find an idiot. Viking fan for life. Should I pick up Doug Baldwin or other wide receivers for future weeks? Will Baldwin be the primary receiver since Harvin is gone? Well, he kind of was the primary receiver in a way, even with Harvin being there. I don't know if it's enough where you need to pick him up. Some other wide receivers to explore the possibilities of getting would be guys maybe like Ruben Randall. I've got a list here of a couple other guys. Like I said before, Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson of the Jaguars. Those are a couple of guys that stand out to me that maybe you should explore picking up. Fandings, thoughts on Chicago's offense this weekend? Sixth lineman to stop Wake, perhaps? Easier to cover wideouts and Bennett? I don't know if they do 6 linemen, but they might have to run more 2 tight end sets, putting Rosario in there to help contain Wake and Vernon. I have some concerns about that matchup. I would say this is that Cutler has produced from at least a fantasy football standpoint, and in some ways you'd have to expect that to continue. But the Dolphins' defense is okay. Um, if I had to say, um, you know, in terms of like Marshall and Jeffrey and Bennett and Forte, usually it's a good bet that 2 out of those 4 or 3 out of those 4 will have a pretty good week. Um, they've done a good job the past couple of weeks getting Forte involved, although I think he could be in for a slowdown this week. I'd probably say Jeffrey and Bennett would be the 2 guys that, well, no, I'd have to say Marshall and Bennett because Marshall might look at this as a revenge game. So he might be a guy that will have a big week. G Drumset. Should I start Jordan Cameron over Owen Daniels at tight end? Yeah, probably. I mean, don't get me wrong, Jordan Cameron still only had 3 catches last week against the Steelers, although one of them was a big 50-plus yard touchdown catch. Um, I would have to say at this point that you got to roll with him and hope that the talent will win out, and that as the season goes along, he'll get even more into form. He'll build a better chemistry and rapport with Brian Hoyer. So yeah, I think you got to sit there and start him over Owen Daniels. Ralph Capone, is Jimmy Graham for Jamal Charles a good trade? I have Isaiah Crowell and Storm Johnson, and my other tight end is Vernon Davis. Those are your running backs. Those are your 2 starting running backs. Oh, good God. Then yes, you have no choice. You have to gamble and hope that Vernon Davis will play better as the season rolls along. And good God, you need the help. Somebody propose this trade to you? Have you tried to propose this trade? Because if you're the one with Jimmy Graham, yeah, you probably need Jamal Charles. I'm just perfectly honest with you. Nart Sokar 25. If Jimmy Graham is good to go tomorrow, should I start him? Depends on your situation. If you don't have much else at tight end, then yeah, you got to roll the dice if he's good to go. Um, if he's good to go, but you have other options out there, maybe like a Dwayne Allen, a Jordan Reed, a Jordan Cameron, then maybe you don't want to gamble on Jimmy Graham getting shut out or seeing the field in a very limited basis. Even if Jimmy Graham did play, I could envision him, playing only a quarter or a third of the offensive snaps. Now he might get some red zone targets, and that's all he would need is, 2 or 3 catches and a touchdown, and he's given you a solid week. Not a Jimmy Graham week, but a solid week nonetheless. But like I said, it depends on your situation. The Owens asked, the wide receivers on my waiver wire are James Jones, Nate Washington, Robert Woods. Who should I get to replace Victor Cruz? Is Ruben Randall on the waiver wire? Because out of those 3 options, none of them really stand out to me. But out of those 3, I'd probably have to say James Jones. Because him and Derek Carr have at times shown a decent chemistry and rapport. And as a result, I think he would be the one most likely to score the most points out of those 3, probably by a good margin throughout the rest of the season. History Buff 188. I have Torrey Smith, AJ Green, and Jeremy Maclin. I'm allowed 3 wide receivers. Should I drop Torrey Smith for James Jones? No, I don't think that's necessary. I mean, I get why you've become a little disenfranchised with Torrey Smith this year, but no, I don't think you're only allowed 3 wide receivers. Why is that? It's kind of a stupid fantasy league, if you ask me. Yeah, I'm being judgmental because that's kind of stupid. Why would you only be allowed 3 wide receivers? What, can you only start 2 of them and then you only have 1 bench slot for a wide receiver? That's just dumb. But no, I would not cut Torrey Smith for James Jones at this point. Dylan Schwartz, which 3 should I start in a half-point PPR league? Out of Storm Johnson, Cecil Shorts, Brian Quick, Keenan Allen, and Devontae Adams. I'd say you got to go with the 3 best players on this list at this point. So even though I usually gravitate towards running backs and I am a Storm Johnson fan, I'm not a fan of how the Jaguars deployed him last week, sitting here and saying, well, we were only going to get him 10 carries. That's just dumb. You needed to run the ball more in the second half if you were the Jaguars. But I'll go with Cecil Shorts, Brian Quick, and Keenan Allen. Exotic Dreams 25 closes this out by asking Reggie Wayne or Jeremy Maclin in a PPR league. I would probably go with Jeremy Maclin, even though I believe the Eagles are on a bye this week. So as a result, you probably would want to go with Reggie Wayne. If I remember correctly, the Eagles, I think, are on a bye this week. You'll probably want to go with Reggie Wayne. Anyways, thanks to you guys that submitted your questions. Keep in mind that you can tweet me your questions to pfspot_Schlegel on Twitter, and I'll answer your questions up until the early afternoon kickoff. See you later.